contemplations before chanting. The Sangha is invited to come back to our breathing, so that our collective energy of mindfulness will bring us together as an organism, going as a river with no more separation. Let the whole Sangha breathe as one body, chant as one body, listen as one body, and transcend the boundaries of a delusive self, liberating from the superiority complex, the inferiority complex, and the equality complex.
Continue the To respect the Thai, dear beloved Sangha, you look very beautiful from here. So I'd like everyone to let's sit together for a couple minutes. Let's meditate together for a couple minutes before we listen to the sounds of the bell. Let's bring our attention to our body. You may either close your eyes or open your eyes, however you feel comfortable. Feel the sensations moving in our body. Relax our shoulders, relax our body. Let's bring our attention to our toes and our feet. Let's breathe with the toes and the feet. Feel the sensations that may be there on our toes and our feet. Relax our body and allow our body to sink into our seat, into the earth. Body expanding as the air comes in, and contracting as the air leaves our body. Let us listen to the sounds of the bell and allow the sound of the bell to vibrate at the same rhythm as the vibration in our body. So good morning, everyone, here and there, to our friends online also. We have about 2 more weeks until the end of the rain retreat. And what a commitment that is for us in participating the whole 3 months. And especially for our lay friends who have more than 1,000 of us online who have joined us for the rains retreat. It's a commitment towards our spiritual endeavors. And we have learned a lot, our friends who are joining us for the 3 months, the friends online, as well as us here in Plum Village. We learn different sutras. We learn different practices. We learn to create new practices, tools to help us. And all the practices that we are learning and practicing are really to help us to wake up, right? To be truly alive. And when we bring the awareness that we are alive, that we're not just dead bodies walking around, that we are truly alive, thanks to the practice of mindfulness, concentration and insight, coming back to ourselves, coming back to the present moment, and to feel our aliveness. That awareness, the awareness that I'm alive, helps us to be truly there. And when we come in touch with our body, with that insight that I'm alive, we can feel this vibration in our body. We can feel life force, the vitality circulating in our body. When we're busy in our head, we don't feel that life force. We don't feel that vitality circulating in our veins, in every cell of our body. And just simply bring the awareness that I'm alive. I am alive, here and now. Helps us to feel that life force, that vitality in us. And what happens when you're able to feel your aliveness and feel this vitality circulating in your body? You see things clearly. One of the things you see is that you're not just dreaming or daydreaming. I notice that when I'm in my thinking, then I'm not really alive. I feel like I'm in a dream state. I'm not really there. I may be there, but I'm not really there. I don't know if you have that experience. And so I'm alive becomes my mantra. I call it the 7th mantra. Thai has 6 mantras already, and this is my 7th mantra. And I practice this mantra, and it is truly a mantra because every time I say, I'm alive, every time I use this mantra, immediately I'm back in the present moment. Immediately I'm in my body, and I feel this vitality in my body. And so I consider that that's an insight to feel my aliveness. We are all alive, I hope, but a lot of time we don't really feel that aliveness in us. We don't really feel that vitality, that life force circulating in our veins, in our body, in our mind. And what happens also is that we see our true nature when we are there, alive, because our true nature is the nature of interconnectedness, interbeing, and this nature is always there. We don't have to wear special glasses to see this nature. We don't have to attend any particular enlightened state to see our aliveness. Our interbeing, our true nature. Our true nature is always there. It's always available. The true nature of reality is always there, always available to us. Except we're not there to recognize it. And the mantra, I'm alive, helps us to establish ourselves in the present moment, in our body, so that we can see our true nature, our nature of interconnectedness, our nature of interbeing. And it's not just ideas and theories anymore. It's really an experience. It's really an insight. And so all the practices are really to help us come back to the present moment, to recognize our true nature, right? That's what these practices are for. That's why we're here, right? And once we tap into our true nature, when we recognize our true nature of interconnectedness, of interbeing, of not having a separate existence, We are living our ultimate reality here and now. We're tapping into the ultimate dimension, our ultimate dimension here and now. And Thai said, we don't need to go anywhere, that the ultimate dimension is already here and now. It's our mind state that determines whether we are able to tap into our ultimate reality here and now or not. And the mantra, I'm alive, helps us to tap into that, our ultimate reality, to experience our ultimate reality right in the present moment. So we have learned a lot of practices, a lot of tools. And we learned that these practices and these tools are helping us to cultivate the energies of mindfulness, concentration, and insight. These are energies that are in us. And these energies in turns help us to be alive, to wake up to who we really are, to our true nature. And that we don't need more knowledge, more teachings, more of this or that. In fact, we need to shut off. We need to let go. So that we can tap into these energies in us. So it's not about getting more, it's about shutting off. And Lao Tzu said to attain knowledge, we add more things. We accumulate more things every day. But to attain wisdom, we need to remove things every day. And what we need is wisdom, is insight. Because it is the insight that helps to free us from our daily suffering, daily turmoils, our limitations, limitations and suffering that may be brought about by the idea of a separate self, separate existence. You name it, there's just so much suffering around the idea of separate existence. Loneliness, fear, feeling of not belonging, that creates a lot of suffering. Not to talk about, other hardcore suffering that goes along with this idea of separateness. And the practice of mindfulness, concentration, and insight that we are cultivating every day with the basic practices. It's the only way for us to deal with the situation that we've been talking about a lot in our community, with the climate change, protecting Mother Earth. It is the insight of interbeing that really urges us towards actions to help care and protect and heal Mother Earth. When we don't have this insight, it may be really difficult to do something for Mother Earth. We may have desire to help, to protect, to take care, and to heal ourselves, other people, and Mother Earth. But, and I'm sure every one of us has this desire, and that's why we're here. Having the desire is really good. That's the first start, right? On this path. But what we need is really insight and wisdom, so that we know what we need to do and what we shouldn't do in order to take care and to protect and to heal. The insight of interconnectedness, the insight of interbeing. It is not something very difficult to tap into. Like I said, they are always there. And what I found, consumption is one of those gateways, that can help us tap into our nature of interbeing and interconnectedness. So today, I'd like to share how we look at the Four Nutriments and how we practice the Four Nutriments. The Four Nutriments are not just theories and ideas, they're practices. They're not just knowledge that we accumulate, but they're actually practices and contemplations in order to help us see our nature of interconnectedness, our nature of interbeing. And so I would like to present the Four Nutriments in that light, in the light of interconnectedness and interbeing, in the light of practice to tap into these insights, which are really our own realities, our own true nature, our ultimate reality. When we think about consumption, we think of getting more, right? You know, when we say that our society is really a consumerism, it's a consumption, a society of consumerism. We think of it in terms of getting more, getting as much as possible, getting that we feel never enough. It's as if there's an abyss that we can never fill up. And when we think of consumption, we think of means of running away as well. A lot of us consume as a way not having to face the present moment, not having to face what's there in ourselves and what's there around us. But consumption can also be a gateway to enlightenment. Consumption can also be a way for us to experience freedom. So there's a sutra, it's called the Sutra on the 4 kinds of nutriments, the Sutra on the sun's flesh. I'm not going to read the whole sutra today. I think that would take a long time. I'm just going to mention bits in the sutra. But there are 4 kinds of nutriments that we consume every day, every moment of our living existence. The first one is called edible food. Food that we consume through our mouth. Food that we consume at least 3 times a day. What are we eating? We know that we are what we eat, right? So what are we eating? It's a good question to ask ourselves when we sit down at the meal or before we get the meal. What are we eating? Bring in awareness to our choice of food. Kind of food that nourish our body, nourish our compassion, nourish our happiness, that preserves the peace and harmony in our body and mind. And avoiding bringing toxins that may be harmful to our body. Why are we eating? Everything eats, right? Everything eats, actually. Everything that's living eats. One day I was having my breakfast outside. It was a beautiful day. And I was, looking at the flowers, and it was in springtime. I was bathing in the sun, morning sun. And I realized everything is eating with me. The trees are eating. They're consuming the air and the sunshine. Just like I am eating not just my breakfast, I'm also eating the sunshine. The grass is also eating. The birds are eating. Everything needs food to survive. Are we eating from a craving? Craving not just for food, but other kinds of craving can be translated into a craving for food as well. Are we eat to forget? That happens too, right? Eating to forget. Are we running away from ourselves and our suffering? That also happens. There are so many sickness that comes about from eating, not just physical but mental also. I remember I was in a group of young adults during the summer retreat, and I had about 20-something young people, beautiful women, beautiful and intelligent and wise. And I was shocked to hear that many of them had eating disorder. So eating unmindfully, eating as a way to run away, to avoid facing ourselves and the suffering, eating from a craving can lead to a lot of sickness, physically and mentally. Who's the person eating? Am I eating out of a habit energy? Because if it's out of a habit energy, it's really my ancestors who are eating. I have a bad habit when I sit down to eat. Something I've been trying to tame all my life as a nun is that every time I sit down, I start to plan. Every time I sit down to eat, that's when planning begins. It's like time to plan. And I realized this is not really the practice of eating meditation. Maybe I'm the only one who's experiencing this. But I realized it's actually my grandfather who's eating. My grandfather was from a poor family and with a lot of children. And when he sits down to eat, he's planning where he can get the next meal for his family. And even though I'm not having to worry about where my next meal comes from or whether I have them or not, but the planning is there, the habit energy is there, the habit energy of eating. And sometimes there's certain habit energy of eating certain food that's not really healthy, but somehow gives a sense of comfort food. And it's a habit energy also that I have received from my parents, my ancestors. So we're not just the one who's eating, it's our ancestors eating as well. Maybe the microorganisms in our guts are eating with us, they're eating. Well, a lot of the food that we're gravitated towards might be foods that these microorganisms are wanting to eat, are wanting us to eat. So they kind of manipulate us towards this kind of food, and a lot of the time, they're not really healthy food. just by that alone, asking who is eating helps us to see our non-selfness, that we're not a separate self, that we're not a separate entity, that at this moment, right now, right here, there are trillions of beings living in this body with me. And that there are countless ancestors who are there in me at this moment, eating. So that alone helps us to see our interconnectedness, our interbeing nature, our true nature. And it's the mindfulness practice that helps us to eat in a way so that we are nurturing our ancestors, nurturing these good microorganisms in our guts, in our body, and nurturing ourselves. How does this food affect my body, mind, and the earth? That's a really good question to ask when we eat. Well, we've learned that we learn to eat with mindfulness so that we can preserve our compassion, our peace, our happiness, and the harmony in ourselves. And there's a contemplation, among the 5 contemplations. May we eat in a way that we reduce the suffering of living beings, preserve our planet, and stop contributing to climate change. That helps us to look into this question: how does this food affect my body and mind and the earth? It's not just about reducing the suffering of living beings, but also reducing our own suffering as well. And we've heard a lot about the climate change. That 1.5 degree increase of the overall temperature can have enormous impact on the earth, on all living beings on the earth. And several years ago, I heard this about this climate change, and that we have a window of about 15 years to do something to reverse the increase of 1.5 degree. But recently with the COP26, it seems like that window is much shorter than 15 years. And that we're approaching this increase much sooner than 15 years. And potentially higher than 1.5 increase of the temperature. And how can we eat? in order to stop contributing to climate change. We know that the meat industry is creating a lot of pollution to our waters, to our air, to the earth. And they're a big contribution to the pollution. We also know that because of raising cattle for the meat industry, that countless forest lands have been deforested in order to raise crops for these cattle, for meat. And it is said that if 50% of the human population reduce meat intake by 50%, or if meat consumption is reduced by 50%, maybe we may have a chance to reverse the increase of climate change, the increase of 1.5 degree. So in our community, we have a vegan, a plant-based diet, and that could be a solution to help with this situation. And for friends out there, maybe eating 15 days a month on a plant-based diet could also help enormously. In other words, it's the insight that the earth is us and we are the earth. What happens to the earth happens to us. That motivates us to take these kind of actions, even if it's little actions, even if it's just reduce, maybe not by 50%, but maybe by 30% or 10%. That's already really helpful. In other words, it's the direction that we're going in, that we're heading in order to help protect Mother Earth, to help take care of Mother Earth and heal Mother Earth. So let me read part of what the Buddha says about these nutriments, the edible food. So the Buddha said, "Bhikkhus, how should a practitioner regard edible food? Imagine a young couple with a boy whom they look after and raise with all their love. One day, they decide to bring their son to another country to make their living. They have to go through the difficulties and dangers of a desert. During the journey, they run out of provisions and fall extremely hungry. There's no way out for them, and they discuss the following plan. We have only one son whom we love with all our heart. If we eat his flesh, we shall survive and manage to overcome this dangerous situation. If we do not eat his flesh, all three of us will die." After this discussion, they killed their son. With tears of pain and grit in their teeth, they ate the flesh of their son, just so as to be able to live and come out of the desert. The Buddha asked, "Do you think that couple ate their son's flesh because they wanted to enjoy its taste? or because they wanted their bodies to have the nutriment that would make them more beautiful? And the monks replied, "No, Venerable Lord." The Buddha asked, "Were the couple forced to eat their son's flesh in order to survive and escape the dangers of the desert?" The monks replied, "Yes, Venerable Lord." The Buddha taught monks every time we ingest edible food, we should train ourselves to look at it as our son's flesh. If we meditate on it in this way, we shall have clear insight and understanding, which puts an end to misperceptions about edible food, and our attachment to sensual pleasures will dissolve. So, eating with the awareness that what we're eating might be the flesh of our children. Because what we're eating may be contributing to making the earth inhabitable for our children. And so, bring in the awareness every time we eat edible food, that we should train to see ourselves that way we may be eating our son's flesh, our children's flesh. So let's go to sense impression. So we consume with our senses. So let me talk a little bit. We learned at one point during this retreat, I believe, we have talked about this model of consciousness that Thầy talked about, that Thầy had taught us. And in this model, in the depths of our consciousness, it's the store consciousness, where we have all kinds of seeds. A whole spectrum of seeds, from the most positive to the most negative, right? And they're sleeping there, waiting for the right condition to manifest. And this is the mind consciousness. And there are 5 sense consciousness. There are the ear, the eyes and the ears, nose, tongue, and body. With the mind, six senses. And we've learned that these are like windows, the senses. Windows for us into the external world, but also windows for the external world to impact us. So whatever we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or think, they go in here and they tap into these seeds. And these seeds vibrates in here, and then it manifests in our mind consciousness. And this is when we experience a mental formation. And whatever that is touched and manifest determines the quality of our mind, right? Determines the quality of our being. So if the seeds of anger and violence are being touched all the time, through the way we think, what we hear, what we see, what we eat. You will tap into the seeds of anger inside us, and this seed will manifest. And that is really the quality of our being. I remember when I first came to Plum Village, this was 30 years ago, a pretty long time. And we had a community of about maybe 20 nuns, monks, monastics, very few lay people. We just had the lower Hamlet and upper Hamlet. And there were months, even the whole year, when I was a novice, I hardly ever leave to go outside. And every day, we didn't have the internet back then. So every day, I was bathing in poetry and music and songs. The poetry, the gathas are like poems, beautiful poems. Like the moment I wake up in the morning, I practice this poem. The waking up this morning, I smile. 24 brand new hours are before me. And I vow to live fully each moment and to look at our beings with the eyes of love, the eyes of compassion. That's a beautiful way to live our life, right? Waking up with a poem. And then in the evening and throughout the day, we have other poems that we practice, and then songs, pretty healthy songs. Songs that water the seeds of joy and the seeds of love. And that we sing before we walk together as a community, before Dharma sharing. We sing before we work, during the time we are working. And then in the evening, as I'm lying there in bed, I'm also reciting this poem. And this poem, a day has passed or is ended. And my life is getting shorter. I lie here to rest peacefully. And a flower blooms on my lips. Một ngày đã trôi qua, mạng sống càng thêm già. Con nằm đây an nghỉ, miệng mỉm cười nở hoa. It's a really beautiful poem in Vietnamese. And so day in and day out, I'm just bathing and living in this kind of environment. And then also nourished by the Dharma, by the brotherhood and sisterhood, by the love. I was one of the youngest monastic back then. And every day I was showered with love from my sisters, from my teacher, and from Thai. I was 22, 23. I was bathing in love every day. And then, of course, nature. Every day, I was nurturing myself with the beauties and the goodness that are surrounding me, that are in me. So for many years, it had been like that. And nowadays, it's not like that, right? Nowadays, we're bombarded with so many distractions. I had this idea, this vision of a monastic, monastics dated back to the time of the Buddha or even before, that they like to go up to the mountains or the forest, like far away from the world, so they're not distracted by the worldly life. So then they can like really cultivate their practice. And once their practice is strong enough, then they go down to the mountain. They go down to the mountain. They go down from the mountain. They go into the world and to serve. Well, nowadays, even if we are in the highest mountain, like in the Himalayas, maybe in the cave of the Himalayas, for example, the world comes to us. It comes to us through, this tablet, this smartphone. And so I found it difficult for us to practice in our time. I mean, it's a bit more challenging to practice in our time, to refrain from these kind of distractions. They're not attraction, they're distractions. One day I was in Canada with Thai, and it was my first time going to Canada, and after the retreat, the Sangha organized a trip to the Niagara Falls. I've always wanted to go to Niagara Falls. I had this beautiful image of the Niagara Falls. And so I was so excited. I couldn't sleep that night. And I was so excited to go to Niagara Falls. It was like a dream come true. And we got on this bus. And the moment we got on this bus, I was falling asleep. I was being cradled by, these motions. I was falling asleep. And then the bus stopped, and I woke up, and everyone was so excited. And I said, "Where are we? What is happening?" And everyone said, "We're here." And I thought, what? Are we here? Because I looked outside and said, "This is not Niagara Falls." And then everyone got off the bus, and got off the bus. And I realized, wait a minute. There's like attraction, like these attraction games and movies and, all kinds of things. I'm like, where are we? I know we're going to the Niagara Falls, but why here? And then the Sangha kept going. I was just following the Sangha. And then I realized for us to get to the Niagara Falls, we have to walk blocks, past blocks of all these attraction, and they are really distraction. That's the kind of world we're living in. That there's just too much distraction, too much information, too many things to take us away from ourselves so that we don't have to face ourselves. And the internet, social media are also helping us in that way as well. And so even since we're novice, we're not really protected, from all this distraction, because the internet, social media is such a common thing now. It's so mainstreamed. It's so inseparable from our life. And even if we think, I'm just spending half an hour watching these movies or, going up to YouTube's for this and that, that wouldn't affect me. But when we sit down at the cushion, these kinds of things will come up again because we have consumed them and they have touched seeds in us that we cannot just say, this has nothing to do with me, this is separate from me, because they are us. When we consume, they become a part of us, and they will continue to affect us. And one of the things that I've a bit shocked to hear, that there's a disorder now called the internet addictive disorder. That there's a large percentage of the human population are kind of addicted to this kind of attraction or distraction, however you look at it. It's an extensive use of the internet, of the social media, that it disrupts our life, physically, mentally, socially, spiritually. And so our practice in our community, we are doing our best to resist this kind of energies entering our community, but it's inevitable. We are so much affected by the internet, and it's up to each individual really to protect ourselves, and with this awareness that what we consume through the internet can affect us enormously. And one of those practices that we can do is really guarding our senses. I remember when I was a novice, when Thai talked about guarding the senses, I thought, I don't need to guard my senses. I mean, I'm surrounded by like such a wholesome environment. I mean, what's there for me to guard against, right? Everything was just so nourishing. It was nourishing my aspiration. It was nourishing me physically, mentally, psychologically, spiritually. But now, this practice, it's so essential if we want to have peaceful, clear mind, so that we can really see ourselves, see other people who are there with us, to see our true nature. Guarding our senses is a practice where we bring mindfulness to our senses. We bring mindfulness every time we come in touch, when our senses come in touch with the external world. And knowing when to stop. We can't not use the internet, right? It's so inseparable from our daily life, but knowing when to stop, knowing why we need to use the internet, and when it's enough, and knowing the impact of what we are interacting with on our body right now, right here, and on our mind. When we see that impact, we can slowly reduce the consumption of the internet, because we see the impact they have on us in a negative way. So the Buddha said about the second nutriment, sense impression, how should the practitioner meditate on the fruit of sense impressions? Imagine a cow which has lost its skin. Wherever it goes, the insects and maggots live in the earth, in the dust, or on the vegetation, attach themselves to the cow and suck its blood. If the cow lies on the earth, the maggots in the earth will attach themselves to it and feed off it. Whether lying down or standing up, the cow will be irritated and suffer pain. When you ingest the food of sense impressions, you should practice to see it in this light. You will have insight, understanding, which puts an end to misperception concerning the food of sense impressions. So when we use the internet, for example, without mindfulness, it's like we're like a cow without skin. There's no protection. And so the practice of guarding our senses is so essential. And also for us monastics, having a second body can be tremendously helpful, so that we can remind each other. It's like having a skin to protect us, so that we're not exposed to all these toxins and negativities, in the internet or around us. So let's go to the third nutriment. The third nutriment is volition. Volition is it's what it is that we want to do with our life, our dreams, our aspiration, our desire. It is what drives us. So, what is my deepest aspiration? What is my deepest desire in this life? That's a good question to ask. What's my purpose in this life? What am I doing here? What am I here? What's my purpose here as a human in this human existence? What kind of energy is driving me? In other words, we have desires, and that's absolutely good to have a desire. But not every desire is healthy. Some desires can lead to a lot of suffering, and some desire can be really helpful and really useful. I think when we look at volition, to look at it to see whether it's useful. Is this making me useful? Is this aspiration, this desire, this volition helping me feel useful to the world? I think that's really important, right? To have a sense of being useful, the usefulness of our life. If my life has no usefulness, really, I have nothing to live for. So if it's a healthy desire, then it brings happiness. It brings compassion. And if our desire is healthy, then it helps us to be useful. And so for us, as monastics, we have desires too. We have this aspiration, right? Our aspiration is to practice to transform ourselves, transform our suffering, so that we can share our experience of how we have transformed our suffering to our friends. So service is another aspect of our aspiration as a monastic. Helping others to see the Dharma, helping others to see the path of beauty, goodness, and truth. And when we practice wholeheartedly, when we practice to transform our suffering, even if we may not have done anything yet to help other people, we are already helping people. We are already being useful. And not just monastics, but also lay practitioners as well. That when we practice to take care of our suffering, our loneliness, our pain, we are given hope to other people that they too can do the same, and that they too can heal themselves with the practice, and that there is a beautiful path. There's a path of goodness. There's a path of truth that we are living, that we are walking on, and that it had helped us very much, and that we are sharing this path to other people so that they too can learn how to take care of their pain and their suffering. An aspiration to do something for the environment, for Mother Earth, even if it might be so small. Last week we had a day when the whole community came together to plant trees. And that was really, really fun. It wasn't just planting trees, but it was also an opportunity to build brotherhood and sisterhood. And I've been, every spring, I would walk around the garden for walk and meditation. I saw these little beautiful plants that come up, and I know my sisters will cut them off with the lawnmower. So I would dig them up and just put them in a pot. Because I enjoy trees so much. And I thought, well, even if they may be babies, but they can become big trees. And New Hamlet really needed trees. And I was amazed. After 16 years, these babies have become like really big tree. And you can see some of them out here. And then one time, one of our brother had said that every time you fly, you need to plant at least one tree. And I flew a lot. So this is a good chance for me to do something for Mother Earth, to repay for all those flights that I have taken. So, I'm more diligent at digging up trees, these baby trees. And now we're planting a forest. And there's just so many trees here in the New Hamlet that are coming from these babies. So little action. But little actions comes from this desire to protect Mother Earth and to give back what we take. And little actions can go a long way. And when I look at these trees, I'm like, wow, a little act can bring a lot of life. And if you're not sure what kind of volition to have, what kind of volition that may be useful and helpful, well, you may like to extend your vision to the other side of the planet, or not even to the other side of the planet, but around you. There are people who are really in hellish situation, people who are suffering enormously, people who don't have food to eat, people who have lost their purpose in living and meaning to their life. Maybe that will give you some ideas. Maybe you can also extend your vision to the planet, our planet that's rotating amidst space, this beautiful planet that's suffering right now. That will give you some ideas of what kind of aspiration to cultivate. And it is through this, the practice of insight, that helps us to find an aspiration, to choose an aspiration or a desire that would help to protect and care and heal. So the Buddha said about the third nutriment, how should the practitioner meditate on the fruit of volition? Imagine there is a village or a large town near a pit of burning charcoal. There are only the smokeless, glowing embers left. Now there is an intelligent man with enough wisdom who does not want to suffer and only wants happiness and peace. He does not want to die and only wants to live. He thinks, over there the heat is very great, although there is no smoke and there are no flames. Still, if I have to go into that pit, there's no doubt I shall die. Knowing this, he is determined to leave that large town or large village and go somewhere else. The practitioner should meditate like this on the fruit of volition. Meditating like this, he will have insight and understanding which puts an end to misperceptions about the fruit of volition. So, in other words, cultivate the insight into what kind of desire, what kind of aspiration that would bring us happiness, that would help us, that makes us useful to the world. And take it up as our life's purpose. So the fourth nutriment, consciousness. When we talk about consciousness, it's the store consciousness we're talking about here. The fourth nutriment is actually the store consciousness. The consciousness here is actually store consciousness. That store consciousness, it's an individual consciousness, but at the same time it is a collective consciousness. In other words, we consume consciousness as food every single moment of our life. Whether that consciousness is coming from inside, or whether that consciousness is coming from outside. Because store consciousness is not just in our body. Store consciousness is actually non-local. That is not just in here or out there. It's everywhere. Because that's why we call soul consciousness a collective, right? That there is no separation between individual and collective. One of the things that many of us are really good at is regurgitating and ruminating on past suffering. We're consuming our consciousness, that dark part of us that's creating so much pain and suffering. And sometimes just ruminating on what on the pain that we have, maybe exaggerating, blowing out of proportion what we had originally experienced. So it's like shooting second arrows onto ourselves. We had a painful experience. And then we ruminate on it, this pain. We can't let it go. And the more we ruminate on it, the more we're creating the stories about it and about ourselves. And it's like shooting second arrows all the time. We learn that second arrows are really coming from the way we look at the situation. And that once the second arrow is shoot at the pain that we have, the original pain that we have, the pain is not just double, it could be manifold more painful. And so I've learned that now we don't call suffering anymore. We call them traumas. Trauma is the kind of suffering that is just so overbearing and it's laden with fear. And how do we practice with that? How do we stop ruminating? How do we snap out of this habit energies of just feeding ourselves with these negativities and this pain, past pain and suffering? Appropriate attention would be really helpful. Paying attention to what is wholesome. Choose to pay attention or to bring attention to things that lead to compassion, understanding, coming in touch with nature, coming in touch with the positive, wholesome qualities in us and around us. You know, when I was, the story about myself being a novice living here, well, I was watering myself. I was bathing in these, wholesome, positive energies of the Sangha and the Dharma, the poems and songs and music and brotherhood and sisterhood. And at the same time, my suffering was lessened. I didn't even have to do anything with my suffering, but these positive elements that go in, they help to balance with the seeds of suffering in the depths of our being, and they help to take care of them and embrace them and help eventually to lessen our suffering. So sometimes you don't need to do anything. Like children who come here, they don't know the practice, they don't practice, but they feel so happy and so peaceful and so loved because they're like absorbing, like a sponge, they're absorbing all this positive energies in them, and these positive energies in them help to take care of any negativities that they may have, just like us. These positive elements that we come in touch with can help us to have balance and can help to transform the seeds of suffering inside of us. So appropriate attention, coming in touch with wholesome, positive qualities in us and around us, in people, in nature, in the situation, in any situation that may be unfolding, can be a really good way to help take care of our soul consciousness, the seeds of suffering in our soul consciousness. So having a Sangha would be really, really, really helpful. And we are very lucky we have a Sangha here. Our friends, even if they are alone in their town, their city, or their country, joining the 3-month rain retreat, they are a part of a larger Sangha. They are a part of our Sangha here as well. And Thai is so keen in building Sangha and has encouraged us in building Sangha. It's a priority in our life to build Sangha so that we can have a beautiful, wholesome environment for ourselves and for other people. In other words, I feel like our practice here, we are cultivating peace and love to resist the collective consciousness out there that may be so negative and so unhealthy. And some people, they come here, even if they're coming for the first time and they don't know much about the practice, the moment they step into Plum Village, they already feel like peaceful and light and happy. Somehow there's something here that makes me feel really at ease, really happy, really peaceful. It's the collective consciousness that we created together through the practice here. As a Sangha, the Sangha protects us. The Sangha is a bubble that we're in, and that protects us from consuming the kind of consciousness that would water the seeds of suffering in us. And this morning I was sitting there watching my brothers and sisters up here singing, chanting, and it's really rare for me to sit there and watch them. Usually I'm a part of them up here. And when I look at them, every single face up here, I felt so grateful to these brothers and sisters for having chosen this path, this life, for being my brothers and sisters on the path. And I don't know who you are and where you're coming from, but now that you have chosen this life, you are my siblings. And I'm really grateful for that. And I see in you the presence of our teacher. And our teacher is really here. Plum Village comes out of Thai's consciousness, Thai's aspiration to build a beautiful, loving community, and we are it. And everywhere we look, we see Thai. Just like the sutra that we're learning, when I went up to the Pali Canon and read this in the Pali Canon, in the Samyutta Nikaya, was a bit hard to understand and to see how it's connected to my life. But Thai has that skill to make it so relevant to us the way he translates these sutras. And he had chosen the sutra because they are so much affecting our life. They are teachings that we are so much needed in our time. And so when you read this translation, it's like, that's Thai's consciousness. So in other words, we are in this bubble of Thai's consciousness, that we're part of Thai's consciousness as well. And even if Thai may not be here one day, his physical presence is not here on earth, Thai continues to be on earth and with us, because Thai's consciousness is embracing us all, and we are a part of Thai's consciousness. And you, my siblings, you are Thai's consciousness. You are coming out of Thai's consciousness. And this consciousness that Thai had, that comes out of Thai's consciousness, is actually expanding. Like out there, over 1 million of our friends are practicing with us. They are coming out of this consciousness as well. The healthy, wholesome consciousness. It's a consciousness that is bright. It's a light that helps show us the way. And we'll continue in this consciousness when we are practicing. Even if we may not be practicing too well, but the moment we're able to take this breath mindfully, the moment we're able to make this step deliberately, touching the earth with our steps, the moment we look at our siblings and our friends with kind eyes, we're continuing this consciousness. We're contributing to the collective energy of awakening to our Sangha and to humankind, to the whole of humanity. And this consciousness, it's an energy. It's a tangible energy. You can feel it in yourself at this moment. This vitality that's circulating in your body. It's a consciousness energy. And energy is something that can travel through space and time. And we are a pocket of light. And this pocket of light is made of this consciousness, awake, collective consciousness of mindfulness, of awakening. And this consciousness is actually rippling out and affecting lives all over the planet. And our friends online are really testimonies of this collective consciousness that's rippling out and embracing the whole of humanity. And what we need now for the earth to be healthy and continue to be healthy for our children is a collective awakening. And so our practice here, every single person is contributing to that collective awakening. So that the whole earth will be embraced by this healthy, consciousness, so that we are consuming healthy consciousness every moment in our life. So thank you so much for being part of this path, my siblings and all my lay friends, and for your contribution to the collective awakening of humanity that is so much needed.